Hi, I'm Joe.
And I'm Dave.
And we're the hosts of the Chasing Tomorrow podcast, where we bring you stories that delve into the science and spirit behind intriguing people doing extraordinary things.
Welcome to the Chasing Tomorrow podcast. This week it's episode 44. We pride ourselves at the Chasing Tomorrow podcast for bringing you exceptional guests that bring the science and the spirit behind endurance activities and incredible performance right to your listening doorstep. This week we have a real special guest for you, and he's a very old friend of mine. His name is Blaine Penny. And Blaine Penny, if you've never heard of him or if you've maybe heard mention of him, he's an incredible human being that brings an absolute incredible athletic resume. He's a sub 230 marathoner, being over the age of 40 and running a sub 230, winning numerous ultra marathons. But also, he's a founder of MitoCanada, which is a really beautiful organization up here in Canada that raises awareness and funds for a rare disease called mitochondrial disease that Blaine and his family are deeply affected with. We'll get into that. But there are really exceptional people in this world that don't just talk about what needs to be done and really the screws that need to be turned in society. There are also people that go out and do them. And Blaine is one of those people. And so it's my absolute pleasure to introduce Blaine Penny to the Chasing Tomorrow podcast to dive into this a little bit more. Welcome to the podcast, Blaine.
Hey, Dave and Joe. Great to be here.
Yeah, Blaine, thanks for taking a little bit of time. I think what if we've learned anything from doing the podcast, it's that this journey that we end up on always isn't something we had imagined. I'm not sure we'd ever imagine, running faster, taking care of issues, or how our lives would, sort of evolve. And so, since yours has taken, I'm sure, some turns you didn't expect, maybe if we start a little bit from the beginning, like where you're a runner in high school and college, did this sort of path towards being a strong athlete, but then also someone who gets involved in, activities. Was that part of you? Maybe there are some foundational elements you could tell us a little bit about, because I'd like to hear the story from the beginning.
Yeah, I had the great fortune of growing up in a small town on the East Coast of Newfoundland. And it was a very much an outdoors oriented community. And I was fortunate to be adopted into a family actually that valued the outdoors and being active. And my dad in particular had tremendous influence on me. And my first real memory of running was we were churchgoers in our household, and I wasn't a big fan of church. More because of the timing of church. I felt it was inconvenient. I was a very active kid, and we were always playing hockey, or and hockey in small town Newfoundland was pond hockey, or you played on the bay kind of thing. And so we're always kicking around with friends, but it just seemed like church at 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning when there was a lot of other fun happening. But my dad, would often, quietly not go to church and go for a run. And I'll never forget the first time he asked me if I wanted to go for a run. And I was like, hell yeah. So I remember, and it was trail running. So we lived in a place where we could just walk out our back door and run forever, and or ski in the winter. So we did a lot of that as a family, hiking, and in particular cross-country skiing in the winter.
Nice. Yeah, that's a good start. I imagine that, in Newfoundland, I guess there's probably not a lot of people even on the podcast who've been anywhere near there, but not flat country at all either, right? I mean, you're up and down. I don't think there's probably 100 yards that are flat, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's pretty rugged terrain around Newfoundland, that's for sure. And it's I think there's an element of that reflected in the people who come from Newfoundland. They're very they're very hardy people who just seem tough. They can weather the storm, just like it's that province has had a lot of challenges over the years. And its people, I think that's reflected in its people.
Yeah,
Maybe.
and Blaine, I've never met a Newfie I didn't like. I hope you don't mind me calling you a Newfie, but I've never met a
All good.
Newfoundlander I never liked. But they embody this incredible spirit, but also this incredible kindness and this kind of wanting to give back and to kind of create a beautiful community around. Do you sometimes miss living in Newfoundland now, living on the mainland?
For sure, it's there's a few things. I mean, obviously, I miss my family. They're all back there, and it's been particularly tough given COVID and the challenges to not be able to see my family. But yeah, like it's just one of the things when I look back and when I think about life in Newfoundland. In some ways, it's a lot simpler, and I would say people are a lot happier with just the small things in life. They tend to family and friend, they're very social, so like just the people connection is a big part of Newfoundland. And it's interesting, just actually I was on Friday night, one of my high school friends called up, and we're just catching up, and we've kept in touch over the years, and he was a good friend of mine, my friend Dana Feltham, that we've grown up since we were like knee high to a grasshopper. And I was just thinking, because my daughter Julia just turned 15, and I was thinking when I was 15, Dana and I were kicking around, and like here we are, like over over 30 years later, we still just pick up the phone and call each other. So it's and there's I have a lot of friends like that, and that I think that's quite common for people in Newfoundland. Is just there's a bond that's created with people growing up, certainly in the small towns for sure, because you spend so much time together.
I think that it's interesting, we've never probably, Dave, really explored this too much, but this, if you start somewhat in a rugged place, ultra marathoning sort of is a bit of just like, that's what it's like, it's cold. I mean, I was originally from northern Vermont up in Burlington, and my father was a pretty rugged guy. And, you didn't make many excuses. As a matter of fact, ironically, he went on his honeymoon with my mother, of course, to Prince Edward Island. And, that's not a place many people go anyway, let alone on your honeymoon. But just a general, I think there's an interesting part of this because, as you got into running, so you went and ran, early on, and then let's talk about how it sort of evolved a little bit, because I'd love to hear a little bit about how you get to, sub 2:30 marathoner, because you got to suffer a little bit along the way. But do you feel like some of that either influence from people you knew, it wasn't a place where you complain, you just go and do it. You think that's helped you become, good at what you do?
Absolutely. And I look around at my dad grew up in a fishing community, and his family, they lived off the land, they farmed and they fished. They worked really, really hard, and I got to see that as a kid growing up, and we kept the family farm going. And my dad worked us pretty hard on the farm to the point where my cousins who got to witness how hard we worked, they felt sorry for us. But it instilled a real a real sense of work ethic, and I think that is something that's stuck with me, I know, through my entire life. But just in general, when I looked around at how like a lot of people had hard lives, like they would get up at 5 a.m. and push their boat out in the water, and they would row out and they would fish all day, and they would come home, and they, like it was just like I got to see that as a kid. And obviously the world, there's lots of conveniences that have been introduced into the world since then, and maybe it's but there's still people who do that and work hard like that. So there's I think there's a culture of that instilled in the small communities where people work with their hands.
Yeah, and Blaine, so and I don't mean to jump ahead too far here in the conversation, but I know you quite well, so I've raced against you. I know your level of grit, and it's ridiculous. And I think it's combined with two things. Number one, your background, your level of commitment, and your level of just get out there and suffer. But also, some of the with you and your family and rare disease, and you like to think that you're tough. You like to think that you can grit it out until you're really forced to when your child gets sick. So do you want to tell us a little bit maybe about your family's history and background and Evan's illness?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, that's been a big part of obviously well, my son Evan just turned 17, so it's been 17 years we've been parents, and it started off with a rough patch right out of the gate, actually. So when Evan was born, we didn't know, but he had a major heart defect, and when he was born, he wasn't getting enough oxygen and required some supplemental oxygen. And the doctors were a little perplexed as to what was going on, and took about a week, and they figured out his heart defect, and he had open heart surgery. Uh, and he fully recovered from that over a period of time. And we thought, okay, as parents, this is as tough as it's going to get, right? So we can handle anything. So back when Evan was 4, he literally woke up one morning with a sore stomach, and we thought he had appendicitis, and we take him to the hospital, and they have a look at him and do an ultrasound on his appendix, and they couldn't see it, so they thought it either ruptured or was hidden. There's like, you know what, let's just take it out to be safe. I'm like, yeah, for sure. I mean, geez, poor guy's had heart surgery. This is like a cut on your finger in comparison. So we wheel Evan into surgery. They removed his appendix, and his appendix actually turned out to be fine, but unfortunately Evan didn't wake up from the surgery. And they initially thought he had a reaction to the morphine, and which wasn't uncommon. But time went by, and 4 hours, 8 hours, 12, 36 hours, and they realized something was seriously wrong. And as it turned out, in that time period, Evan had suffered a brain injury. He had slipped into a coma, and he went about a week before he opened his eyes. And when he did, he was stiff as a board as a result of the brain injury. He was just like hypertonic, and it was it was all happening in real time. And this is where I always think about the human brain can only process so much at any given time. And for us, both my wife and I are engineers, we're problem solvers. So we're just like, okay, what's the current problem? Well, the current problem is we need to understand what's wrong with Evan. And there's every specialist you can imagine around Evan trying to figure out what was going on. And what they focused in on was the brain and the brain injury, and they diagnosed him with a neurological disease, which is called ADEM, which stands for Acute Disseminated Encephalomyelitis. And so it's like, okay, never heard of it. And so you look it up, and basically it's like a one-time acute attack on the brain, or autoimmune attack on the brain. And 9 out of 10 kids would fully recover. So we're like, okay, we just need to rehab Evan, and we'll get him back to health. So we did. So we just set it on that path, which we knew it was going to be a long road. And this is where the running weaves in. And it's we're Evan's at the hospital for months on end, and we're there 24/7, not wanting to leave, looking for more answers, wanting to speed up the process. And the doctors pull us aside one day and say, like, look, okay, we realize like you're caring parents. We know like you would do anything for your kid, but you realize that if you don't look after yourself, you can't look after Evan. Mm-hmm. And so that was that really stood out to me. And that's where I was like, okay, it is really important that I put on my running shoes every day and I go outside and I get some fresh air. So that's that was sort of the turning point for me, where I realized, I need to have an outlet to manage this stress along the way. And that's that was a real, I guess, turn for me. I was always fit and ran a bit to stay healthy, but that was when I was like, I need to, I really need to make sure I look after myself, and running was the most convenient way to do that.
Yeah, and then it was successful as well too. You were able to translate some of your energy into going out and putting in miles and some speed and on and so forth. But when did Blaine, we're going to get to this bigger story here in a little bit, because you've really mobilized an entire community of runners, of athletes, with MitoCanada, with the foundation that you founded. You've really mobilized this entire community. When did that first start? Did you end up calling a couple friends? Did you say, hey, this mitochondrial disease thing, we need to do something about this? Tell us a little bit more about kind of gathering your friends and building this community.
So just picking up from Evan's diagnosis. So unfortunately he didn't improve and started to go downhill, and that's when doctors suspected something there was a bigger underlying problem. And after significantly more testing, and a year later, we get a test results indicating that Evan has a probable mitochondrial disease based on he had dysfunctional mitochondria. So it was then again, you open up Google and say, okay, what is mitochondrial disease? And at the time, our doctor, doing the best he could, said, hey, I encourage you to check out the United Mitochondrial Disease Foundation in the US. You'll learn about the disease. They have an annual symposium in Washington, D.C. You should go check it out. You'll meet some other families. Take these vitamins for your child, and called the Mito cocktail, and come see me in 6 months. And that was the best he could do. So off I went to this conference, met some other families, and that's when we said, we need to do something back in Canada. So we came back and made a pact that we're, every Sunday night we get on the horn and we talk about, what is it we can do together as a group of families to make a difference, and what was important. So that's where we realized that we wanted to be able to raise significant amounts of funds for research, which meant we need to be a registered charity. We wanted to support families, and we wanted to create awareness about the disease. So on one of our runs, a friend of mine, Duncan Marsden's like, hey, tell me about this charity thing you're looking to kick off the ground. And Duncan's a lawyer at BLG. And he sent me an email about what is you're looking to do, and I'll see if I can get some help. So I did, and they said, hey, we're going to help you through the charity registration process. I was like, great. And this normally takes 6, 12, 24 months. It's a lot of paperwork. But Duncan had a tremendous team behind him, and lo and behold, a couple months later, we were a registered charity, and we're like, okay, what are we going to do now? And Duncan being a runner, and a bunch of my friends being runners, were like, hey, let's go out and do a run to raise some money and get this thing going. So that's how it all started.
Wow, that's great. I do want to just jump back on that point, Blaine, that you made before, which was the doctor gave you advice to take care of yourself. Early on in my career, I was told that there's this order of priority, that you take care of yourself first, your family second, and your work third. Because if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of the other two. And I think we often forget that, and we prioritize ourselves third, and family, work, and us. And then you don't become as good of a servant that you should be or could be. And so it's good that you got that advice early on. It's not a piece of advice we often give to people because it sounds awfully selfish. However, especially something that that has gone on in your life for so long, it could completely wear you out if you weren't balancing out yourself so you can be strong. It doesn't have to be running. It could be whatever else we would do to invest in ourselves. So I'm glad that you learned that early and seem to have continued along that path.
Yeah, and that's a good point too, right? It's like a lot of things in life. I think we need to remind ourselves over and over again, and have some triggers that that force you to pause and think, okay, how are all these pieces fitting together? And am I looking after myself? Am I being the best person I can be as a father, as a husband, in my work and everything I do in life? Because it's, we're all human, and life just happens. And if we don't take those times to pause and go, okay, what am I doing to look after me, so I can be my best version of myself?
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right, Blaine. I think that finding that balance, especially when you're a father of a child with a special needs, there is an incredible imbalance, right? Where when it comes to their needs, they're never fulfilled. I mean, you could be spending all of your time and emotion there, and it's never full enough. So finding that balance is important. How about your balance these days when it comes to work and family and athletics? Do you feel that you're balanced these days?
I do, and maybe it's a bit of a blessing with COVID, working from home. But and I think this whole notion of balance is a bit of a misnomer in a way. Like and I say that in the sense of there's a lot of things that are important to me in life, and there's a lot of things I enjoy doing. There's a lot of things I want to do. So I'm always very conscious of time, and so I often think of balance of recognizing when you're compromising too much, in any one arena. So yeah, I think we can all relate to being a parent, like, yeah, you can never put in enough time or spend enough time with your kids, right? And at work, there's always one more thing that needs to be done. And if you're a runner or an athlete, that, wow, if I didn't do this, or could have done a little bit more of that. But like, I think at the end of the day, it's just being, what's good enough. Because if you strive for perfection, I think in each of those areas, you're always going to feel like you're coming up short. And I would say that's something that I've come to terms with a lot more over the last couple of years, and just sort of accepting that, no matter what I do for Evan, absolutely, I'm going to feel like I want to do more, but just being a little kinder to myself, I guess, in that sense, that it's important to, as you say, to try and have that balance, and spread your time out where you do have that sense of fulfillment beyond just those immediate needs in life. And as you say, a child with special needs can be very demanding, especially when they they go through lots of bouts of illness and sickness. We spend a lot of time in the hospital, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I think
let's.
there's this, I'm sorry, Dave, this 24 hours in a day, right? That's fixed. We sort of know that. And I think then it's about really thinking about how effectively you use your 24 hours, right? And so whether the word balance is the right word, or consciousness about time and time management and being effective with it, so that they're impactful hours, sleeping, working, allocating the time to the various priorities is probably even more important when you have an acute situation in your life. If you're 17 years old and nothing's gone wrong and you're in high school, you could probably just sort of do what you want and binge on Netflix. But in most of our situation, I think we get the best return when we really think through that. And I'm sure that over these years, you've tried to figure out, okay, I can, run for an hour and a half. I can work for 8 hours. Because it really is the only always the currency that we trade in our lives. And if we use it right, we actually get a great return. Have you gotten better at it?
Yeah, I think so, and I really like how you frame that, and that's it's kind of how I think about it as well. And what I've noticed too is I've gotten older. In a few short years I'll be 50, which it's getting up there, and but I'm definitely much more conscientious of time, and spending it, like you say, in the areas that are really important to me. So I just find myself just being more cognizant of time as a whole. And like you say, it's okay. Like for many years on weekends, we didn't have any care for Evan. So it was my wife and I dividing and conquering just to get a bit of fresh air and a break from things, right? And now we have a nurse on Saturdays, so we can actually plan ahead to do things. And it's just pure joy to think, wow, I can maybe take 8 hours and maybe I can go into mountains and go for a run or ski. Like it's just yeah, time is an amazing thing. It's a gift. So it's we only have, like I say, a finite amount of time, but in our case, I've definitely felt that I'm just, yeah, I'm really aware of where I spend my time and make sure it's doing what I want with the people that are important to me.
Yeah, and so Blaine, let's go back to the word passion that you brought up a little bit before, because when I think of you, you embody, passion and a purpose and a drive. But it's not only that, but you also are an incredible leader that you'll end up getting this large, swath of people behind you that give up their time and give up their energy and give up their everything, because they see, that drive within you. So let's talk a little bit about kind of your passion projects with MitoCanada, and let's start off with the Guinness World Record for the fastest marathon. I think it was 10 men who were tied together.
Yeah.
Record. Do you want to? What year was that in again?
It's in 2013. So yeah, and it was a continuation on the first run that we did with MitoCanada. We realized, wow, like runner, the early realization where there's lots of people out there who like to challenge themselves to run or bike or triathlons, but I tell you, like when you give them the opportunity to do something for a greater purpose above and beyond just their own personal pursuit, it's incredible. People come out of the woodwork and are just like, yeah, like I want to, I want to help make a difference. So that's sort of was the genesis behind, Team MitoCanada, which evolved into being involved the Calgary Marathon every year, I think since 2011 or 2012. And in 2013, we were the featured charity at the Calgary Marathon. So we're like, okay, we got to do something big this year. We've got to, we think we've got the stage. Let's make the most of it. And again, just like most good ideas, they come from Sunday runs. We're kicking around, hey, what could we do? And the guys started talking about, hey, there's, there's in San Francisco, they do these like centipede runs. Maybe we tie a whole bunch of us together. And we're, and somebody said, I bet you there's a Guinness World Record for something silly like that. So someone looked it up, and there was a linked marathon, or fastest linked marathon record out there. I think that was around a 3-hour mark, and it was set by 5 guys somewhere in the UK. So we're like, oh, we can totally take that down, and being a little ambitious. So we threw it out there, and we managed to get 10 people who were interested. So we decided to link 10 people together using surgical tube as our tether, and ran a 2:55 marathon with 10 of us, which was an incredibly special moment, and a real reminder of you're only as strong as your weakest link, and the power of a team, and being inspired, and just making it all come together on a day. That was pretty cool.
What was it like? Was it difficult to stay together like that?
Yeah, and and we had never, all 10 of us had not trained together at one time prior to that. We had a few training sessions. We were kind of winging it. We didn't have a lot of time, so the most important thing was figuring out what's the proper spacing. And once we figured that out, and we had a good friend of mine, Jody Droughty. We call him the metronome. He's a phenomenal pacer, so we put Jody at the front. And we figured out our spacing and our stride within the first few kilometers, and off we went. It was pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. I always appreciate when you're in a race and you see the people who are out there who are doing something much harder. Like I did this mountain bike race last year in Leadville, and there was a guy riding with one leg, and then there was a guy riding with one arm, and I'm like, okay, this isn't so hard. Like, yeah. You see 10 of you going by, you're like, okay, I shouldn't complain. There's a good point of relative effort that one should always notice in life, right? Before we open our mouths to complain.
Well, yeah, and Joe, that reminds me of that who was that Blaine that was at the Calgary Marathon? He was on the skateboard.
Chris.
Chris.
Yeah.
No, he has no arms and no legs, but he has just this little like a stump from his leg, and he just pushed himself along the marathon in a skateboard. And you're thinking, what am I complaining about out there? Look at this guy. Yeah. But Blaine, let's jump a little bit into the story as well too, where hey, 10 guys running a marathon tethered. That sounds impressive. But what about over 100? You want to tell us about that story?
Yeah, so one thing led to another, and we realized, with that run, it was tremendously successful. We set the record, and we raised over $100,000 for this little charity, which was amazing, right? So like, okay, we're on to something here. And then and through that process, I met Dave as well. And back in 2016, Dave had a bold idea. We did 6 or 7 Guinness World Records on treadmills, and that was another tremendously successful run. But one of the challenges that we had with our charity was, people always looked at us setting these records and just like as this elite group of runners, and that people weren't worthy enough to participate and run with us. And we're like, no, that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to mobilize the masses. We really want to get the word out about this disease and create as much awareness. So we need as many people involved. So it was, I guess, in 2017 or 2018, which was Canada's 150th anniversary. So I thought, why don't we do something big this year? So I thought, like, there was this record for the most link runners to complete a marathon. And the record, I think, was 89 people tethered together, running a marathon, all tied together. So you just think logistics, exponential, like our 10-man,
Wow.
that was so easy in comparison. So that was a fun project. And to your point, Dave, the running part and on the day is always sort of like that icing on the cake, but it was so cool to put that project together. And it started with, hey, we've got this big idea of, we want to get 150 people on Canada's 150th birthday and raise $150,000. So we put the call out, and we said, okay, if anybody can comfortably run a 5-hour marathon and raise $1,000 or attempt to raise $1,000 for charity, you're welcome to join the team. And people came out of the woodwork, and we had people signing up. It was amazing. And then people started self-selecting, and it was interesting because some people were like, okay, are you sure? Like, do you want to check the credentials of these people to make sure that they can run? So it was a really interesting social science experiment because people started self-selecting, going, I don't want to be the weakest link. And it was amazing how many people started dropping out because they're afraid they're going to be the weakest link. And I'll never forget Nathan Kendrick, who I run with quite a bit. Was really concerned about being on his feet for running 5 or 6 hours. And Nathan back in the day was a phenomenal track runner, and I think he was a 2:22 marathoner in his day. But he was the one that I remember who was the most concerned about whether he could run this marathon. I'm like, Nathan, I think you're going to be okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, it all came together, and in the end, we had 112 runners that made it there on the day, and we linked everyone up, and off we went, and had I would say definitely the craziest, most nerve-wracking marathon I've run to date.
Gosh. I think it's hard just following a pacer who has a little sign, everyone's staying together, let alone all being linked together, huh? Did you guys have coordination for stopping at an aid station to get a drink and all that work too?
Yeah, you bet. And the biggest, the number one question we got from people, like, what are you going to do for the bathroom, right? So there were aid stations all throughout the race, right? But again, like, we were this, picture this 100-meter long, spring of runners, right? All tethered together with surgical tubing. So if someone at the front stopped, like, it's just like this domino effect, right? People would just pile on top of each other. So the communication was such a huge part of this. So what we ended up doing was we formed pods of 15 runners, 3 wide by 5 deep, and each pod had someone with a radio and we're a pod leader. And then we spaced each pod out by about 10 feet, and each runner was spaced 5 feet apart. So we had a little more give between each of the pods, and so that allowed us to have a bit of give in our call it our 100-meter long spring, and we could communicate. And what we decided to do with nutrition and bathroom breaks was to pre-plan our own stops approximately every hour and a half. And we told everyone, okay, you've got to hold it for an hour and a half, and you need to be able to carry any fluids or food that you need with you in between those stops, because all it takes is one person to trip up and to break the tether, and the whole thing was off. So we had to be really, really careful and communicate really well throughout. And it worked out. We planned out our 3 stops throughout the race, where we could on clip, go to the washroom, take a 10-minute break, refuel, and link back up, and off we go for the next leg of the run.
Wow.
Yeah, and Joe, that was a really hot day as well too. I was at the finish line because I ended up running. There was a 150 kilometer for the Canada's 150th birthday. I ended up running that, and I was already at the finish, and to watch everybody coming through, and you end up going over the timing line thing. Bing, 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 bing. It was incredible, like this big green mass that was coming through. But I remember, Blaine, looking at some of the runners, and they were pretty tired, or I don't even know how they were still standing at that time. Were you worried about some of the runners out there during that run?
Oh, 100%. Actually, we had several challenges on the day, as you can imagine. It didn't go. It was not smooth sailing. Let's just say, and we knew we were going to have issues.
Yeah.
But one of them was going to be 6 to 7 hours on our feet in the sun. And as Dave said, it was a pretty hot day. So I'll never forget when we stopped our last stop in front of the CBC building, and I'm going to guess we had about 10K to go at that point. Someone says to me, okay, one of our runners is he's not feeling well, and he's pretty warm. And I went over and I checked on him, and he was like sitting in the shade, and I was like, oh my goodness, like I don't think he's going to be able to get back up. He was not in good shape at all. And a friend of mine who was just following us on a bike, and she lived close by, and she said, hey, is there anything I can do? I'm like, can you get some ice? So she biked to her house, got a big bag of ice, and came back, and we took this big bag of ice and literally put it on this guy's back and shoulders, and we stuffed ice down his shirt, and he said, I'm getting to that finish line. There's nothing going to stop me from getting to that finish line. And we just set the pace to accommodate what he could do, and he made it. But then, as we're going along, again, unexpectedly, we had runners with cramps, like just having to stop, and we stretched out our spring. At one point, we thought we were gonna bust the whole thing with about 1 kilometer to go, due to some cramps. So it was a tremendously nail-biting moments in the end, but we managed to keep it all together and all trickle in across the finish line and claim the record.
Yeah, what's really interesting is it shows that sort of this power of the goal and the alignment to the goal and the commitment to the goal. And as a society, just generally, when we can figure that out, right? Because we're usually all pretty good people, and sometimes bad things happen, but that's because we sort of lose track of the fact that we are part of a community, and that what we do actually has an effect not just on us, but on other people. And the more we get closer to that, the harder it is to not want to do good. It's when we sort of get too far from the center, and we lose a little bit of track of, we get a little more selfish. But that's just a great example of that alignment, right? In a normal day, that guy probably would have quit, right? Because he didn't feel good. But, it's okay to work through not feeling good. And, I almost think about what's been happening sort of with our COVID response. Once we start getting aligned around getting vaccines, now it's starting to happen more quickly. And just in life in general, being clear about communications, make sure we reinforce it, be there to support people, measure them and make them feel accountable to themselves and the group. And we have remarkable, results that can come from that. So just a fantastic example of that.
Yeah. And there's two other things, that really stood out for me through all of these, big runs we've done together with groups, with MitoCanada and these records, where one was, even though we did have a goal, but our goal was to finish together first, and that was paramount to the record. So we were very clear about what the goals were up front. So it was more about the process, right? So we really enjoyed that process and of just the fun of doing something wacky together for a good cause, right? And it was a lot of fun. But secondly, the power of the group effect, right? I think it's talked a lot about in training groups and in running, and certainly at the elite level. But I think you see it in everything, and it's the power of team and collaboration and alignment, right? So I think it was a great example when I look back on all of these. Like you're right, like I bet you, like if some of these records, if we were to try them again, it would probably take 5 or 10 tries to pull them off again. Like there's something special about when you do it once and it's like, okay, there's a moment, it feels electrifying, and you just feel that energy on the day is special. So I think it's tough to repeat, but when you're, I think forging new ground, doing something unique together, that's challenging. Everyone steps up in a way that surprises you, and you overcome things that you thought would have been insurpassable. So it's kind of neat when you look back and just like, wow, like what are the chances?
Well, yeah, and I agree, Blaine. And if you don't mind me interjecting a little, for a second about a personal story that I have with MitoCanada. Blaine alluded earlier to, the Mito treadmill event in 2016, and I end up after the World Championships, the World 24-Hour Championships in Torino, Italy. I gave Blaine a call the day when I got back home, and I said, I just set the Canadian 24-hour record. I was looking online, and I wanted to see what the world record for running on treadmill was, and I think it's very doable. It's only 800 meters further than what I ran in Italy. But treadmills are tough, right? And I said, what do you think about putting on an event? And Blaine said, yeah, let's do it. And I think within 8 hours, we end up constructing a men's team of 12 runners that would just jump on and off the treadmill. I believe it was every half an hour. So every runner had to do four half-an-hour blocks. And all these runners were running to the capacity of the treadmill. It was like 18 or 20 kilometers an hour, which was just lightning fast. And a women's team of 12, and then Ariel Fitzgerald ended up running the world record, 50K and 100K. She even peed herself while running on the treadmill. We got to get her on the podcast as well too. Just even to hear that story about somebody who pees himself on a treadmill. But I ended up breaking the 12-hour and 24-hour world record that day. I ran 260.4 kilometers. It's 261 miles on the treadmill. But the reason why I'm telling the story is to just give our listeners a little bit of background of who Blaine is. Now, Blaine, look at you, Blaine. You don't really lift yourself up, but you're an incredible leader. And I remember at about 22 and a half hours into the 24-hour run, the building at the Big Four building started getting really full. And I kind of wanted everybody to leave me alone because I was in a lot of pain. Like I was suffering big time. And you probably saw it on my face. And I remember Sharon came to me and said, Dave, what do you need? And I said, go find Blaine. And I remember Blaine came over, and he was even wearing a MitoCanada cape, because you were going to be the last runner on the treadmill, I believe, as well too.
Yeah.
So you were getting ready for your last half an hour. And you came over and you listened to me, and I think I gave you I don't remember what I said, but I gave you some sort of sob story about how, woe is me, I'm in so much discomfort, I'm, this sucks, this really sucks, Blaine. And, you listened to me and you gave me a couple really good choice words, but then also, healthy, constructive thoughts. But then you said something like, Dave, if just imagine if your son and my son could be up here running on this treadmill right now, that you're complaining and wanting to stop, they would never stop, but they can't, because they can't be up here running on these treadmills. And you just walked away and you turned around and you said, Dave, let's finish what you started. And I've never felt as driven. I've never felt as lifted as I was in that moment. I ended up picking up the pace on the treadmill, and I finished really strong. I think I was maybe 3 or 4 kilometers over the world record. But that form of leadership and that form of passion, I think people everywhere are looking for people like you that would follow in your footsteps. And it doesn't really matter what you're leading, and you're leading something incredible, Blaine. But have you always been a leader, even in your youth, when you were a young parent, even now? Have you always been a leader?
I don't know. I think you have to ask other people. It's one of those things, like it's something I've always valued. I've always looked up to great leaders. And there's just something about, you realize I guess from a young age, I always saw that, there's as an individual, you can accomplish, this much, but as a team and as a group, and, you just see some of the greatest accomplishments in the world where when people come together, and the sum of the parts are just so much, more powerful and effective, right? And so I guess it's something that's always sort of been part of my fabric. But I was a pretty shy kid, and didn't think of myself as a leader. And to be honest, even though I was kind of thrust into leadership roles, I was never comfortable with that. But I was very fortunate to have supportive people around me and mentors that encouraged me to step up. But I think back to, in high school, I had some friends that said, "Hey, you should run for high school, for the student council president." And I'm like, that's the last thing I would want to do. And they said, "Well, we're gonna put. We think you'd be a great student council president, and like we're gonna put the nomination. Okay, if you put the nomination in and you do the entire campaign, I'll do it." And they did, and I won. So that was probably the beginning of this trajectory. And again, I'm very fortunate to have people around me, but that have encouraged me to challenge myself and step up. But I think back to your treadmill, Dave, and I remember the first thing when you said, "Hey, I want to do this treadmill thing and raise awareness for mitochondrial disease." The first thing I thought was, okay, that's awesome. I said, like, but I had this picture of a lonely person running in this big empty warehouse for 24 hours with a few people around them, trying to stay motivated. And I thought, well, you're gonna need a lot of people, so like around you to stay motivated and to get through this. So I'm like, well, why don't we put a few more treadmills in there and have people running with you? I'm like, why don't we figure out if there's a few more records that we could do alongside you? And again, it was just like, how do we lift your boat with others around you? And that's sort of how that all unfolded. And I'm sure, like, I'm sure you got to the 22 and a half hour mark before you really started to question your sanity around why you're doing what you're doing. But I think that if you didn't have Ariel and the women's team and the men's team and that energy around you, it would have been a whole lot tougher. And I don't know if you would have kept had the motivation to keep going. So, but I do remember as well, Dave, in that moment that you're like, say, you were really questioning if you could endure this pain and get through it. And you had a picture of Sam there, and I said, don't forget why you're doing this, right? And that's all you needed. And sometimes we just need that reminder of why we're doing something. That's all it was.
And I think, Blaine, you really touch on, there are different models for leadership, and the one that I've probably felt the strongest about is a servant leader model. And so a servant leader leads through service by challenging people to the level of their ability, building the confidence in them for what they can do, understanding more than they know about their capability and being there for them. And that's a different kind of model. And I think it's certainly contemporary, but also why someone like yourself wouldn't put leadership probably as the first word you would describe yourself. You'd call yourself a servant, I bet, in a minute, because that's what you've done for your son. That's what you did for Dave. That's what you've done through your life. But when you do that, you can serve and not be a leader, but you can serve and be a leader when you do actually get people to accomplish the goals that they need to accomplish, and then to the organization's goals. And, sometimes it's only just inviting them and bringing them along. And when I've, been interesting, because 4 years ago this week, I had taken on this challenge to run a marathon on 6 continents in 6 days. And so today would sort of be between Singapore and Johannesburg. And I was thinking a little bit about how the whole week came together and how, we organized it, took 9 months. It was on commercial planes. So if the plane didn't take off, thing would have fallen apart, But I had people in every location. I wrote this long sort of instruction to them as to what I wanted them to do. And everyone did what they wanted to do to support me. All they had to do was pick me up at the airport and get me back there. And they took over, right? They then owned it. And it was for them the opportunity. So all I did really was invite them there and give them the opportunity to lead. And they were so excited to be part of it that it turns out, like, towards the week, I was realizing the week was about everyone but me, in a sense, that I was facilitating people reaching deep. Someone ran 10K they never ran before. I had one guy when we were in Sao Paulo, he couldn't run, didn't have a bike. He took a scooter for 42 kilometers and went around Sao Paulo on a scooter because he wanted to be there for the experience. And so that is what the opportunity that we have is, if we have that ability to challenge and to feel good about people, is to do that for any of our listeners. Leadership doesn't just mean, being elected or being in charge, right? I think it means believing in people and challenging them to be the best versions of themselves and getting them there so that the world becomes a better place by so doing. So I think you are a leader in that way, in a very good way.
Thank you. And that's listening to you describe that story of your epic marathons there, and the people who stepped up and did things that they probably didn't realize they were capable of doing. And I think it makes me think about a lot of people sell themselves short and don't realize what they are capable of or what their potential is. And I think when I think of leadership, I think of, okay, well, how do you challenge people to think about what their potential is and how they can get there, right? Like, what do you think you're truly capable of, whether it's, in any facet of life? And I think when people do that, or you give them that opportunity, they'll often surprise themselves and surprise others. So like you say, in a lot of cases, it's just giving people the opportunity, and you'll be surprised every time. And it's the human potential is amazing.
Yeah, I think that what happens is there really is no failure in life, right? Life is living. So there is no such thing as failure, because that's just sort of a definition that makes no sense. So what you have to do, though, to get failure erased from someone's mind is to give them the support, right? To be there for them all the time, regardless of the outcome. And they don't find that often enough in life, right? It's often missed, right? So maybe it came from your family. It might have come somewhere else, but we all have that opportunity to do that for each other. And so that, whether the guy needed ice on his neck, he believed in you guys, you were helping him. And so it is really up to us to do that. You never said, oh my God, your performance is bad, what's the matter with you? Instead, you're like, hey, here we are to help you, and that there is no failure in this moment. And I think that that is something that we can all, listening to the podcast, in our lives, in every way, if you I always said, like, sort of, if you want to feel good about your own life, then do more for others. Right? That is like the most fun, rewarding, satisfying, place you can find yourself, because you may never know how many people you positively impacted, but they'll know. And that's the magic that we all have, sort of at our fingertips, and we're capable of using, which seems like you're good at too. So, by the way, you're still pretty young, I must tell you. You have many years here. So,
I hope so. I hope so.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. So, tell us a little bit. How is your son doing now? Where has it evolved into? Because it's been a long time now.
Yeah, it's so he's 17, just turned 17 on March 29th. Which is, and again, every birthday is a gift. Like, there's very few kids with Evan's condition that would live past their teens. So, we take it a day at a time. But he has had a great year, to be honest. Evan suffers from severe scoliosis. He's a spastic quadriplegic. He's nonverbal. He can't tell us when he's in pain or what hurts. So it's extremely challenging to problem solve, but obviously it's just excruciating when you watch your child in pain. But so a big part of the last number of years in terms of Evan's quality of life is just comfort in his ability to sit in his wheelchair without being in pain, or to lie in his bed without being in pain. But yeah, like he's had a great year. He just got vaccinated last Thursday. So I cannot tell you the relief that in him getting that vaccination, it's huge. So yeah, he's doing well. He's obviously, like, I still dream one day that he's gonna fire up those vocal cords and tell us what he's thinking and what's going on. And so that's I still think that's a possibility. So.
And that's beautiful, Blaine. And your dreams go a long way, not just with your son, but also with many other special needs families that you've touched. And you'll probably never know, Blaine, how many lives you've positively touched and contributed to. I know of countless people that you've never met that talk about you and Sarah in a beautiful way. And so just know that people around you that you have never, you don't know, just see you in such a beautiful light, and they try to do what Blaine and Sarah have done, and that's just living with a beautiful existence and on and so forth. So Blaine, we're getting to the point of the podcast where we kind of start wrapping things up, and we start to try to understand, okay, we know who this Blaine Penny guy is. And you know what? You're the average of the 5 people you hang around with most. People go find friends like Blaine. Go exude that spirit, because that's a winning spirit. But really, what's next for you, Blaine? What's your chasing tomorrow? What's in store for you for 2021? You and your family.
Yeah, hopefully everyone vaccinated.
Yes.
Step one. Yeah, I would say it's when I think about what's next, I just changed jobs, and I would say I've never enjoyed my work more than I do right now, and I'm currently working for a company called CastX Ventures, and we are like a biotech accelerator, and we're developing therapies for diseases. And so I look at the trajectory of my life in terms of the experiences, the amount of time we've spent in a hospital, the amount of time that we've worked with physicians, the work we've done with MitoCanada, and understanding the research community and mobilizing that research community to talk about funding, which we've done. We funded a lot of research, but it's like, how do you translate that to improve lives? So I feel like for me, the next thing is just like is to be part of, again, it's the engineer in me, it's the problem solving. I see there's lots of problems to be solved, and to be working with such a talented group of people who know how to develop drugs and therapies, and have a tremendous team around it. I feel so fortunate to have found my sweet spot, I think, for the extension. I'll say the extension of my life's work. It does just feel like the next logical step. So I'm tremendously excited about that. And then, personally, it's Evan's 17, my daughter Julia's 15. Just a few more years, and she'll be out of the nest. And yeah, it's thinking about, okay, what's that next stage in sort of personal life, and making sure she's set up for continuing education, hopefully. And but also I'm thinking of some other adventures. I don't like to sit still, and I've taken up a new sport of kite surfing, and did a lot of snow kiting this winter in the mountains. So I've got some ideas cooking in the back of my head of some cool adventures I'd like to do with my kite pulling me along in the wind. So yeah, we'll see where it takes me, but as long as that wind is at my back and pulling me, I should be going in the right direction, I think.
That's a beautiful way to end. I just want to make one comment, which I don't think a lot of people really fully understand. The 2 vaccines that are mRNA vaccines, the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, were driven mostly from data scientists, really, at the end of the day, right? It's a data modeling experiment that has been working for 17 years to get to a point where we were able to, in a very short period of time, analyze this virus and come up with a resolved way of, immunizing us against it, which is probably the way that, both your son and others in the future will be able to get treatment, because we'll be able to unravel how come the DNA didn't work the way it was supposed to, and then reprogram it, and the body can heal off of that. So there is actually the work you're doing in that regard and others is going to accelerate the kinds of, and that's why this research is so important. it's going to really accelerate the healing of people who heretofore it's been difficult because the normal process is difficult to see the insight because it's such a limited view of the data. When we can look at it in a very sort of global basis, we're going to find a lot of solutions in the next 5 to 10 years that may never have been found. So it's really very encouraging because it's working right now, and good stuff to see.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%, Joe. And the other thing as well, which is we're learning through this is, as we look at some of these diseases that are, that manifest as we age, we're going to understand those better as well, like neurodegenerative diseases and the role that things like mitochondrial dysfunction play in that. So on one hand, we're going to be curing many of these genetic diseases through gene therapies and cell therapies and things like that. But also, I think I'm really optimistic that we're going to be able to live a much longer, healthier life as a result of these discoveries. So so maybe Dave will be running ultra marathons well into his hundreds. Who knows?
Well, no, he probably will be. But I'm not a scientist at all, but I've done a lot of own sort of whatever amateur research. But the one that touches on this idea of the mitochondria, which is sort of the core of our cell, right? And we generate more mitochondria as we grow. In the early stage of our life, tons of mitochondria get produced. And as we sort of crest over what used to sort of be the middle part of our lives, you start to see a decline. But what triggers a slowing of the decline is exercise, because the body responds and says, oh, whoa, I got to continue to make these mitochondria. And so I have found, because I'm not the youngest guy on this podcast here, is that my continued exercise is the buffering against aging. Now, it doesn't have to be at breakneck speed. It just has to trigger the system to continue to want to produce, because the body knows how to do that. But without that sort of stimulus, it doesn't happen as much. So that word that keeps coming through a lot of this discussion is why exercise. And if you see, I've always said, like, my goal is to be one of the faster 85-year-olds, that I will stay. Like, that'll be the time when I can probably be fast, because most people choose to not continue to develop through the years. And, but that is this active decision we can make. There's so many other benefits that come from it, but at that cellular level. Now, maybe we'll trigger that differently in 10 or 15 years where we can continue to get that to happen. But yeah, if Dave keeps going, that mitochondria will just keep producing, and he won't. This is why we're all sort of continuing to form as we get older, right? This didn't happen before because we quit and we stopped. When you stop, then the decline happens. So it's really fascinating to understand more and more about how the system works.
Well, and to be honest, it's one of the reasons that I know it's important to get out there and move every day and do something active, because, I've seen so much of the science, like it's, as much as we want to define that exercise in a pill, it's not there yet. And there's no secret sauce other than getting out there and doing exercise is good for your body, right? So, we see it, like say at the cellular level with Evan and people impacted by mitochondrial disease, but it also, we all, that's one thing that we can take away is by exercising, you're producing more mitochondria, and that creates just, good things all throughout your body and a healthier you.
Wow. Well, this was fabulous, Blaine. Just a pleasure to have you on. We're here to support anything we could ever do. Best to you and Evan and the family. And thanks for being such an amazing person, taking care of him and so many others. You're a great role model for all of our listeners.
Thank you, Joe, Dave. I really appreciate the opportunity to have the conversation and to share my thoughts on a few of these topics and the journey. It's been a great conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, Blaine. Thanks a lot, buddy.
All right. See ya.
Yep.